Well, good morning. Man, I am honestly, you're supposed to say you're excited, right? That's just what you're supposed to say right now. But I am legitimately excited that I was able to spend the weekend with you and to culminate it with this. It's just been awesome. So thank you for letting me be with you this weekend. I got to hang out with a lot of the guys on Friday night. That was amazing. I got to hang out with some of you couples and a couple of individuals yesterday. That was amazing. And I'm just hoping today we can really culminate this weekend by just being inspired a bit. And I've known Charlie and Leslie for a long time, and the one thing I respect about both of them, and I know you see it too, is that they are people that are living their lives by a different standard, and that they see something about the way of Jesus that should be applied to all of us. And I know that their hope and my hope and something that I got to see. I've known Charlie, man, longer than he probably cares to admit. He was in college, and I have always seen this ideal in him that he knows that this Jesus thing is too good to be led by paid professionals only. Amen. That this kingdom is supposed to be inserted into each of our chests and spread throughout this community. And that there is really something about that happening that is a difficult thing in our culture, to be honest with you. This is not an easy thing. There is a script that has been handed to us by America and whatever culture, a Christian culture, America, that says this is how you do church. And that script kind of runs counter to some of the things that I know that is in Charlie and Leslie's heart. And that's kind of what it's counter to me too. And the script was something like this. And I've been around long enough, and I've seen some of these things. I know Charlie's seen some of these things, and I know you have too. This is no secret, but you guys know the script, right? You get the young pastor that comes in. He's good looking. He's a good speaker. He builds up a church, and it grows, and it turns into, maybe not at first it wasn't his intent, but it turns into an empire where he is the leader and can do no wrong. And everyone says how great his sermons are and how awesome he is, and over time he kind of believes it, and over time there's a moral failure that happens, and then that paid professional drops, and then everything's scattered, and everyone's like, what the heck just happened? That's a script that I have seen happen over and over and over and over again, and it's not Jesus' fault. And it is a cultural issue. And what I want to do today is I want to help us think about a new script, a flipping of the script, if you will. And it was about 7 years ago where I really felt convicted strongly that I was supposed to leave campus ministry, and I was supposed to figure out a new way, like something that would empower the ordinary person to an extraordinary mission. And what I did is I knew I needed to get away. You know how you're supposed to clear your mind and get out of what your routine is. And so I had the perfect setup. My brother, he owned some land in Canada. And you all know there's like 14 people in Canada, right? And so I go up to Canada, and not only did he purchase land there, he purchased an island 5 miles away from anything that was land. So I was on an island by myself, with my brother, which is basically like by myself. And it was just me, my brother, and the loons for 9 days. And I read through something called the Merged Gospels, where it takes all 4 gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, puts them together in a chronological way. And I'd never read the Gospels that way before, where it was like, this is chronologically what we think happened, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And as I read that, for the first time in my life, I started to analyze. This is a guy who's preached my whole life, too. Like, I was in ministry for 25, 30 years, and I actually sit down and I read the Gospels almost like with fresh eyes, seeing what was the method of Jesus. Not his message necessarily. I love his message. I preached that enough. I was like, okay, what is his method? And we looked at that, and I just was kind of overwhelmed and blown away by some of this methodology. And what I did is I ended up writing down 5 key points, 5 things that I noticed were rhythms of Jesus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it was very moving, and then I set it aside. After that, I went on a little tour of reading books about movements overseas. internationally, seeing that there was like hundreds of thousands of people coming to Jesus in some of these movements. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, there's some things out there that we're not aware of. It's unbelievably, God's moving so strong in China, even in Iran and other places in the world that we don't usually think of. And as I started listening to interviews with them, reading books, podcasts, wouldn't you know, there was 5 methods that just kept coming up. And they were the same 5 methods that I just read on that island. And I just had goosebumps like constantly. I was like, whoo! And guess what? Those 5 things are largely what we're not doing as churches here with the script that's been given to us in America. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of share those 5 things with you this morning. A flipping of the script, if you will. And so script number 1 is being before doing. Being before doing. It says here that Jesus himself often slipped away into the wilderness to pray. This is not just a one-time event for Jesus. He was always doing that. Have you ever noticed that? As soon as he got a crowd, he ran. And he was in the wilderness by himself, getting ready for the next thing. He was always preparing himself by his being first before he would do any of the doing next. I want you guys to repeat this phrase after me. You can't give what you don't have. Maybe a better way to say it, you can't share what you don't have. You can't share what you don't have. You run upon somebody at the park who's dying of thirst, laying there on the ground. What does that person need? He needs water. We all know he needs water. If you don't have water to give, he's going to still be thirsty. The last thing he needs is a study on H2O. Right? It's like, I want to help you, buddy. Like, you know how important water is right now? I don't know if you know this or not, but let me help you understand. No, you need to give them what you have. And one example of that for me was I was in Bible college, and there's a guy named Dr. Doty who was a founding father of this Bible college. And he was quite old at the time, and he was starting to have some very prominent signs of dementia that was coming on pretty strong. And the college loved him though, and they wanted to honor him, and they continued to give him an office, and they even gave him one class to teach. It's kind of a token appreciation. I signed up for that class. Myself and one other girl that I don't know her name. Okay? There was just 2 of us in the class. And I show up to the first day of class, and I'm being taught by the legendary Dr. Doty. And he comes in his old style way, and he's got a three-piece suit, and he stands behind the lectern, and he clears his throat, and he's ready to preach. And, you know, and of course he stands up straight, and he preaches and projects his voice like there's a crowd of 50 there. And he just says, Hebrews, the class was Hebrews, chapter 1. And then he went on to absolutely blow my mind. The detail, the amount of application that was coming out of this sermon, it was so good that I actually, for maybe only one or two times in my entire career at a Bible college, actually wanted to take notes. And so I turned like I always did if I needed to take notes, because I was never prepared. And I had to elbow the only other person in the class and say, do you have a pen I could borrow? And then I get this pen and I write down these notes. I just took notes the whole time. Afterwards, he leaves. This other student and I look at each other and we're just like, whoa, this is amazing. I can't wait for the next class. And we knew that he had dementia, and we knew that this was clearly one of his good days. The next class, we show up, and he wasn't there. And we both knew why. And, you know, what you're supposed to do as a student right there is be like, oh, they're not here, peace out. But we wanted more. And so I walked down to Doc Doty's office, and I said, hey, Doc, can I walk you to class today? Oh, yeah. We kind of forgot, of course. And he gets up and gets the stuff, comes down, sits down. I sit there, and he clears his voice like he did before, and he says, Hebrews, chapter 1. And he preached. And was he preaching? Did he think he was preaching the same sermon? Yes. But there was something very different in what he said. There was a lot of new things included. Enough new things that I borrowed a pen for like the 3rd time in my life. And I took notes through that whole sermon or talk or teaching, whatever you want to call it. And I kid you not, this is the God honest truth. Every single week, he taught on Hebrews chapter 1. And every single week I took notes. Why is that? Because it was in him. His being was so strong that it came out in his doing. Even when his mind was gone, his being was strong. And I made a point in that time to say, I want to be a person of being. I want to make sure that I get alone with the Lord. I want to make sure that I'm filled with him. I want to make sure that I've got wholeness. I want to make sure that I'm able to share something to people. Even if I can't explain it always with my mouth, I can always give it in a way to other people. So being before doing. We're obsessed in this culture of a script that says, just do it. Nike. How about if we could be before the next? The second one is chaos before order. We got to flip that script. Instead of order first, we start with chaos first. Jesus was always going into the remote places, into the edges of society. He was always hanging out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes. This was not something, they weren't coming to him. I guarantee you, they're not coming to church. He's going to them. This is the way Jesus was. Jesus, if you really think about it, and this kind of goes counter to our culture too, Jesus was never a host. He was always a guest. He lived as a guest in other people's proximity. And this really came to light with me as this example comes to mind. This is what I always think of when I think of this topic. My wife and I, our 10-year anniversary, we decided to go on a cruise. It was our first and only cruise. It was a good cruise. It was a good experience. If you've ever been on one, I recommend it. They're pretty fun. The thing I like most about the cruise is that you unpack once, and then the hotel takes you wherever you want to go, right? And then they make these stops along the way, and one of the stops, you can see where you're gonna stop in the future. And I looked on the list, and it says that one of the stops was going to be Haiti. Now, I kind of scratched my head a little bit, and maybe you are too, because anything I know about Haiti and everything I know about cruise culture, they don't line up. I thought this is going to be one of those places. I definitely got to see what this is all about. So they stop and they put down that ramp, and I walked down the ramp, and there's this little Haitian band that was sitting there playing. And this is like the token band. I think they were playing like Yankee Doodle Dandy or something. I was like, this is really weird. And as we came down the ramp, they had their Haitian garb and traditional stuff on. And we go to the beach, and I was very surprised because there was no glass broken. There was no sea glass. We experienced that yesterday. I took a walk with the kids. There was no garbage, and there was no Haitians. And as you might suspect, there was behind all the bushes a fence. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk along this fence. And I got to a spot that was like kind of an opening, and there was these two little girls sitting on the other side of that fence, dirt on their faces and these big, beautiful brown eyes, and they looked at me like they'd been caught. And I could only imagine what was going through their mind, because I was very different than they were. And I wanted so badly for them to maybe, just for a split second, my mind was thinking, how cool would it be if I could somehow bring them onto the ship where all the ice cream they could eat and all the games they could play and how much fun they would have and all that kind of stuff. But in that moment, too, it was very evident that I was different. I spoke a different language. I had a different skin color, was a different race. And I came from that big boat. And I realized in that moment that even if I could convince them to come on that ship, and even if it was okay by the people on the ship, there's no way that they would actually follow me, because they knew that wasn't their place. I got back onto the ship, and there was cruise culture that kind of hit me in the face. You guys know the cruise culture, right? And there was people there that had been on many cruises, and this one lady was on her 24th cruise. And the reason I know that is because about every other sentence I heard her say, "This is my 24th cruise." And she said something very interesting as we got back onto the ship after the Haiti stop. She said, "I love Haiti." And I was like, interesting. Do you even know Haiti? And I think her heart was in a good spot. I'm not trying to judge her, but what she said next was a little bit weird too. She said, "If I could, I would love to pay for at least 3 of those Haitians that I met." And I'm thinking, I assume you meant the band. That's all the people she would have ever met. I would pay for those three people to go on a cruise because everyone deserves a cruise in their life. And there was something that really struck me hard about maybe the parallel that we make with church, that we end up sometimes building our churches into cruise ships. And we love it. And we've been going here for 24 years. And everything you want is here. Everything, the kids program is for you, and all these things are for, it's perfect. Why wouldn't everybody want to come to our ship? And the reality is that there are parts of this community, even here, that do not believe that this is the culture. Now, I know you guys don't have a cruise ship, but follow my illustration. Like, there are people that are never going to feel like this place is theirs. And maybe what needs to happen is we need to find ways to contextualize the beauty of Jesus and the movement of Jesus to follow those kids on the other side of that gate home and provide for them what they need in their context, because Jesus is for everybody. Amen? Third thing that I think is important is that we need self-discovery before formal teaching. I think I skipped over Jesus' example there. Oh no, I guess I mentioned that he hang on with tax collectors and whatever. Okay, all right, we'll keep moving. Self-discovery before formal teaching. Jesus said, "Who do you say I am?" That's probably the most famous thing that he asked, the famous question that he asked, but I'm just telling you, do you guys know that he asked 307 questions that we know of? And he knew the answer to every one of them. So why would he ask questions that he knew the answer to? Other than the fact that he knew that that's the best way that we can learn. You ask questions and allow for some silence, the Holy Spirit could come in and actually answer questions that would never happen on our own. We have got to be good question askers. Jesus was a great question asker. And maybe one of the most prominent examples I can think of in my history of being a campus minister, man, in campus ministry, you get all kinds of weird stuff happening, okay? There's some really crazy stories. This might be the craziest of the stories that actually happened to me years ago. So I get a call from one of my student leaders. She was at our campus house. So we had a little house with some offices and stuff and a little meeting space. She called me from the campus house and she said, "Pete, I'm really freaked out. Can you come down here right now?" And I'm like, "What happened? Did somebody mess it up or whatever?" She goes, "No, actually it's really, really clean." I'm like, "Oh, that is kind of weird." But what's so freaky about it? She says, "You'll just have to find out when you come down here." I said, "Okay." So I make way to the campus house. I live about a mile away. And as I walk in, it was a Sunday night, and it was dark. It was just getting dark. You know that time of year when it gets dark. Does it get dark like 4 o'clock here? Yeah, it was like the same thing in Illinois. So it was just like that weird time where everything was starting to get dark. And I knew exactly what she meant right away, because there were lit candles on paper plates in the center of every room. Freaky. And as I walked in, I saw this. I was like, this is really bizarre. Then I looked up at the windows. I got even more freaked out because there was Bibles propped up, facing out, saying Holy Bible in every window as if to keep the evil out. Freakier. And as we walked around, there was just this vibe that something was really off. And we began to realize things like, hey, all the pictures are gone of people, but all the pictures of places are still up. That's bizarre. And it became pretty clear over time that this was not some kind of a prank. It was too thorough and it was too weird. And there was some cooked meat in the fridge, and there was underwear soaking in the kitchen sink. I was like, okay, this is really bizarre. And so as we're getting really, really freaked out at this point, we hear the front door open. And Brittany and I look at each other. It's getting dark. All the settings is there. It's kind of a good ghost story, actually. This will be something you can tell your kids later. And as that door opens up, the short little woman with a big bag over her back, garbage bag, comes in. Never saw her before in my life. She locks eyes with me, drops the bag, and walks straight to me until she's like right in my face, and I could see all the crazy in her eyes. And she says this in a whisper, which sometimes a whisper is even creepier, right? Or maybe always it's creepier. But she says, "Come on in, I've been expecting you. Have a seat." So I go over and I sit down, and as she sits down and she's waiting to have this conversation with me, I say, in a gentle way, but a direct way, "This actually isn't your house." "It most certainly is." And I was like, okay. That didn't go well. So I try again, and I say another statement, and she blows up again. I'm like, this is not going well. Brittany jumps in. I say, "Brittany, I'm going to go in the other room," and she knows why, right? Dee, dee, dee. And I'm about to go in the other room, and Brittany, as I'm leaving, I hear her ask a question. "So how often do you have company?" "Oh, 2 or 3 times a week." "Oh, and what do you usually serve them?" "Coffee and tea." And she calmed down, and Brittany kept asking questions. And over time, the questions ended up kicking her out of whatever mental spike she was in and into some reality. And by the time the police came, she was calm and she knew she shouldn't be there. And it was questions that took her out of that state. I took that to heart when I had teenagers. There was a lot of times where I felt like they needed to hear some statements from me, and it didn't go so well. Questions lead to self-discovery. Jesus asked them, so should we. That is flipping the script. Number 3. Number 4, it's time before invitation. One of my favorite verses is Mark 3:13, where he says that he called to him those he wanted, and he hung out with them. He was with them. They were together. Like, just this idea of hanging out, this idea of being together. There is a discipleship principle that I want you guys to hear today, and I don't have a lot of illustration for this one, but I just want it because I want to get to the last point. But this principle is this: there is no substitute for time. There's no substitute for time. If you really want to change somebody's life, if you really want to see them become what they need to become, go to Walmart with them. Don't just hang out one time at church or whatever it might. You need to spend time with them. There's no substitute for time. And I am so grateful that I had people that invested time into my life. The script has to be flipped there, guys. The script that's been given to us by American church is just invite your friends to church, everything's gonna be great, and don't invest the time. Invest the time before just invitation. Last one, authority before assignment. As Jesus was getting into the boat, you guys remember that time when there's the demon-possessed man? The man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, and Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." To set this story up, in case you're not familiar with it, moments before, this demon-possessed man is naked, he has cut himself, he is breaking chains, he is absolutely out of control, everyone's freaked out, nobody can trust the guy. There were a legion of demons that were in him that ended up going into some pigs, and now they're over the edge of a cliff. It's crazy town. And now this guy is sitting cross-legged in his right mind, and everyone's astonished that he is absolutely changed in a moment. And then what precedes this is that this demon-possessed man says, "I want to follow you. I want to grow in you. I want to be a disciple of yours." And Jesus tells him, "No. You're ready. You're ready before you think you are, buddy. Go home and tell him everything I've done for you. you're more ready than you think. I had a minister that came into my life as a 19-year-old, crazy missionary guy. His name was Al Hamilton. Al had a way of telling every single person and convincing every single person that they should be a missionary. And his idea of missionary was like overseas missionary, like go. And Al had been invited 3 times to be a speaker at a Bible college, and he was only invited once. Every Bible college that invited him, uninvited him immediately, because as soon as he would get a microphone in front of him, he would say, y'all need to quit school, drop out, and go on the mission field. That was always his message. Obviously, the leadership didn't like him, but us students, we kind of really loved him. And I didn't know what was going to come out of the guy's mouth next. Like, he was always doing some really crazy things, like very, very extreme things. And one of the things, probably one of the most extreme things, I don't agree with this, by the way, just so you know, is there was a gal that was convinced that she was going to need to commit suicide. And he's like, and she says, I want to talk to you about this. And he says, absolutely. And immediately, he doesn't try to talk her out of it at all. He says, if you're really set on dying, I suggest we strap some Bibles to your back, and I know 3 countries, if you take them in there, you'll get shot for sure. Not a good idea. But the point was, his idea was, go, have a purpose. And actually, that turned out to be an incredibly powerful illustration of this girl finding that she had a purpose, and she didn't, obviously, take him up on a suggestion. But Al was always so extreme that I didn't know what was going to come out of his mouth next. And it made me want to just follow him around. As a 19-year-old, I'm like, who is this guy? And one week, he calls me up and he says, hey, I've got a church I'm supposed to preach at up in northern Michigan. I was in central Michigan. And he says, it's about an 1.5 to 2-hour drive. I'd love to have somebody ride with me. I'm supposed to speak at this church. Would you come with me? I was like, absolutely. So I jumped in the car with Al. And immediately as we pull out of the driveway, he says, I just want you to know that I really think it'd be best if today you preached instead of me. And I laughed because I was like, Al, I'm 19 and I've never preached a sermon in my life. And his response was very simple and very direct, and something I never forgot. He says, don't worry, most people sleep anyway. But from that time, at the beginning of that trip to the end, I started prepping for this sermon. And I'm like, what do you think about this text? And he was like, great. What do you think if I made these points out of it? Great idea. Awesome. By the time I got there, I was on cloud 9, and I thought I was going to just wow these people. Like, I was convinced. Al convinced me that I was an amazing preacher. Never preached once in my life. I was ready to go. And I showed up. I was nervous, I was excited, all those things, and I get up in front of this small congregation and I preach my guts out, and it was horrible, okay? Way worse than I probably care to admit. But the reception from the people was so great because they knew it was my first sermon, and they saw something in me that was passion-filled and not polished. And I just want you to know, people in this world don't care about you being polished, they care about you being passionate. And you can do extraordinary things if you just let yourself believe that you've got permission. And this is really what I want to end with here, is that you have authority. The authority of Jesus comes in that Great Commission. Do you remember at the end of Jesus' life, and he commissions everybody? What were the first words? He says, all authority in heaven and on earth, every bit of it is in me. And now in the name of me, you get to go do whatever you want. Isn't that freeing? Isn't that exciting? To know that the authority of all authorities has power to give you permission to do something extraordinary in your life. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I want to pour the rest of my life into doing. That's what Charlie's excited about. That's what this church is going to become. Yes. I want you guys to believe it, to understand it, and to know it. And so for the next, 2 months, Charlie's got a plan, and some of the things that we've started talking about, I think, going to be unveiled before you, is how we can actually do that, because you need steps. You need steps, and you need a plan, and you need a community. You've got all those things right here, and I'm so pumped about that. And I was just talking to Charlie's kids and to Leslie on the way here. It's like, I know you guys are moving locations in a couple weeks, right? And I'm pretty excited about maybe in the future, in a year or two, me coming back and not just seeing your new boat, because I'm sure it'll be great, but I'm excited about seeing the new faces and about hearing about the new missions that each of you have, that you're living out in an extraordinary way.